Hello there. Good morning at the beginning of a new week. I want to look at the little incident in the middle of this story of David and Ziklag, and David retrieving his wives and the wives of all his men and the children and everything that belonged to them. I've been thinking about it the last 2 days. If you haven't heard it, briefly, David and his men had settled in Ziklag and had wives and children, and they'd been away, and it took them 3 days to travel home. And when they got home, they found that their city had been burned to the ground and everything in it taken away. They didn't know the fate of any of the people they loved. They just knew they'd been taken away. And they were devastated. They were exhausted with the trek home that they'd had, and with the disappointment and the horror of finding what they found when they got home. They nearly stoned David, but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God, and he asked God what he should do, and the Lord told him to pursue the people and that everything would be restored to him. And then as they were on their way, verse 11 of 1 Samuel 30 says, they found an Egyptian in the open country and brought him to David. And they gave him bread and he ate, and they gave him water to drink, and they gave him a piece of cake of figs and a cluster of raisins. And when he'd eaten, his spirit revived, for he'd not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. And David said to him, to whom do you belong, and where are you from? He said, I'm a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite, and my master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We had made a raid upon the Negeb of the Cherethites, and upon that which belongs to Judah, and upon the Negeb of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said to him, will you take me down to this band? And he said to him, swear to me by God, that you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this band. And so this Egyptian led David to where the men were who had attacked Ziklag. This Egyptian, this story, it speaks so much to me. In one sense, it's a sort of parallel to the Good Samaritan story that Jesus told, except in that story, the person who had been beaten up was a Jew, and the person who helped him was a stranger, a Samaritan. In this case, the man who was abused, and the man who was sick and left for dead, without food or water, was an Egyptian, and the one who helped him was David. And it was 3 days and 3 nights. I think that's significant. And he was an Egyptian. He was a foreigner. He was one of those who had burned and attacked and burned Ziklag. David had every reason not to help this man. He was an enemy. And he'd done terrible things against David. And it's such a picture of salvation. You know, before we were saved, we were in the enemy camp. We were living for the enemy. We didn't know any better. This man had no choice. He was a servant. But he was in the wrong camp. And David gave him bread and figs and raisins. And raisins to me speak of wine. Feels like a communion almost. He gave him sustenance. The man had been without bread and water. He gave him what he needed to be restored to good health. The man had been sick, and he was obviously recovered from his sickness, but he was in a terrible situation. He would have died if David had not taken him in. You know, the enemy of our souls, all he wants to do is to destroy us. And when we are no longer any use to him, he throws us out. He has no further use for us. There's no love lost between the enemy and his people. But the mercy of God, demonstrated here in David's actions, is an invitation. Join my side. Work with me, help me, and you can join us. Help me find these people, and you can join us. And he did. and his life was transformed by David. It's a wonderful picture. It's a wonderful picture. It doesn't matter how awful the things that we have done against God. Just like the things this man had done were dreadful against the people of God. The attacks he'd been involved in. But the mercy of God extended to this man. Oh, it was wonderful. That was Terry sneezing, if you heard the sneeze. God bless you, Terry. And I think it's a wonderful picture of God's mercy and kindness extended to people who don't deserve it. I mean, he doesn't say, I'm sorry for what was done to your people. He doesn't apologize even, but he is welcomed in because he changes sides and his allegiance comes to David. David is a wonderful picture here of Jesus, who meets with us with infinite kindness and care, who listens to our story, understands where we come from, and meets our needs and restores us to health and strength. That is the purpose of Jesus, is to restore us, is to renew us, is to forgive us, is to give us back our dignity, to give us back our life. And joining David's band was the best thing this man could ever do. I think it's a beautiful story. Whenever I read it, I see the mercy of God extended through David to this man. Even in a dire situation where, he still didn't know if the women and children were safe. He still didn't know. But he stopped long enough to restore this man whom they met on the way. That's 1 Samuel 30, 11 to 15. Have a great day today, and thank the Lord for all that he's done, all the mercy he extended to you. Even the things that he did for you before you even knew who he was. Praise God. The God we worship and praise is a wonderfully generous and kind God. That's my thought for the day. Have a great day. God bless you. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.